What's up YouTube, Capital G here, talking about hand traps in this video and asking the question, is the era of the hand trap officially over in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG? Because I actually think that it is. I know some people are going to think that I am absolutely crazy, but you just got to hear me out. And let me just go ahead and specify, I am talking about the TCG side of Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously not the OCG. I mean, they're still up to their eyeballs in hand traps, especially because they have Max C. Hell, they're playing Designated to the Grave or Called from the Grave or whatever it's called, just to stop all the hand traps. But in the TCG, I think going into next format is going to be drastically different, and I don't think that we're going to be in the hand trap world that we've been in for like the last 8 months. You guys know at one point, especially before Spiral lost Quick Fix to 1 and Drone to 1, it was almost unplayable. Like the game was almost unplayable without a bunch of hand traps. I mean, we saw people topping YCS's playing upwards of like 14 hand traps, which is utterly insane. At that point, you're barely even running, you know, whatever engine it is for the deck that you're actually playing. It's almost like you're playing hand traps featuring that deck. But, you know, those were the life and times that we lived in. And honestly, I thought that we were about to have to double down. You guys know that there were still a bunch of hand traps that were extremely popular in main decks. Maxi was pretty much a staple amongst all decks. Ash Blossom, I would argue, was right there with it. I would think Ghost Ogre and Gamma were kind of interchangeable. A lot of Spiral players that I saw preferred to run Gamma. A lot of people decided to run Ghost Ogre. And then you had Droll and Lockbird, which was played still in Trickstar. Still a lot of people side decked it. So you could see a ton of hand traps still being played. And I know it was very popular for the Spiral Mirror match to bring in something like Winter Cherry. So you had like 6 huge hand traps. All of them were seeing prominent play, but I think we're going to be moving towards a meta where we're probably only going to be seeing one of these cards in the main deck, and everything else is just going to be allotted to the side. Now, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to be, you know, tooting my own horn. Oh, yeah, Cap G called it, baby. Give me my props. Yeah, because I did say by the end of the year, I thought that the hand trap era would be over. I thought that traps would make their way back into the game, and I think that we've reached that point, but it's not necessarily like how I thought we'd arrive at the destination. Number one, Konami kind of forced our hand a little bit, and that's because Maxi is obviously no longer playable in the TCG, or at least you guys, I'm not sure when you'll see this, probably Monday, but yeah, Maxi is out of the game, so that takes away the best hand trap in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! So obviously that's going to make, you know, an empty spot in most people's decks, but that one's going to kind of hurt, and we're not going to be able to replace something like Maxi. But I think that when you look at the decks that people think are going to be the new meta, I just don't think that we're going to have we're not going to have such a spam link centric meta where hand traps are kind of a necessity. And I feel like I just need to, you know, say my 2 cents about hand traps. I've never actually thought that they were an evil. Some people call them a necessary evil. Some people, my boy Gage is always talking about how the game of Yu-Gi-Oh was never like, it was never a good thing for hand traps to even be made in this game, which I guess is somewhat debatable. But I've never looked at them as a bad thing, because I generally like to point to the decks like Spiral and Pendulum Magicians, and I say, if you guys didn't warp the format so effing much, then we wouldn't necessarily have to play hand traps. You know, against Spiral, even after Quick Fix and after Drone went to 1, if you went second against that deck and you didn't have a Gamma, a Maxi, you know, a Ghost Ogre for their Field Spell or for Double Helix, if you didn't have the Ash Blossom, you knew that you weren't going to win the duel. They were going to make Double Helix. They were probably going to make Decode Talker, bring Double Helix back. Sometimes they could go for Tri-Gate Wizard. 99.9% they were going to drop Sleeper on your ass, and that card was going to blow up your entire effing field. So you knew you got to deal with that. They were going to make, like, Spiral was going to make such an uncrackable board that you had to play that one card to potentially stop them. Otherwise, it was going to be damn near unwinnable. The same thing goes with Pendulum Magicians, which just kind of added fuel to the fire. These are cards that should be very matchup dependent, but people migrated them into the main deck because these decks were too consistent, they were too strong, and they kind of warped the format. Spiral and Pendulum Magicians will probably not be top 5 decks, so with them not being top 5, you're not going to have a meta where people feel like they lose the duel going second Now, obviously, I'm not a psychic. I can't predict the future, although sometimes I pretend to be one on YouTube. I just feel like a lot of what we believe is going to be the meta for the next format, these decks are not strong enough to really warrant a ton of hand traps being played. Their ceilings aren't so high like Spiral and Pendulum Magician. Take ABC and Trickstar, for example. Trickstar is completely skated. A lot of people were saying their default, the best deck of the format. Okay, that's fine. Trickstars go first. Maybe they do a couple of searches between Light Stage and Candina. They summon Lyco Risk, and a lot of times they just set Reincarnation. Maybe they Reincarnation your hand, you take a bunch of burn damage, you get a couple of one-ups banished, which can be mildly annoying. Damn, I don't get to play Solemn Judgment or Monster Reborn this duel. That's fine. After that, where are they really going? Because it seems like they kind of have to interact with you for the rest of the duel. Same thing with ABC. The ceiling is a little bit higher with ABC because sometimes it can make a little bit more of an oppressive board with Decode Talker plus ABC Buster Dragon. If you're playing a one summon deck, Buster Dragon can just be like, nope, you're getting banished. No way, Jose, we've got a ton of damage on board. But outside of that, it still feels like you can just Dark Hole them, Interrupted Slumber them, set a whole bunch of trap cards, make them kind of play Russian roulette with trying to pick your board wipe. It feels like some of these decks may have that perfect play that they can go to where it's like, damn, I didn't hand trap them, I lost because he opened up with Reincarnation plus, Drawn on Lockbird, or he opened up with Decode plus double Buster Dragon and I couldn't play around that. But those feel like they're just, the absolute peak of those decks rather than the norm of Pendulum Magicians and Spiral where you knew you were going to lose. And that's when I look at the hand traps and I just think there's not going to be a necessity. I mean, if you look at the game right now, I think that cards like Ogre are necessities. You need to be able to Ogre Electromite if you have any hope of stopping Pendulum Magicians. Ogre also doubles as a card that stops Spiral Resort and stops Double Helix from popping off too, so Ogre kind of became a staple. Ash Blossom stops all searching, which every single deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Wants to do, or every Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck has some type of draw. It also stops things like Joker from being able to search. It also stops Double Helix from being able to summon from the deck, so it basically just becomes a staple as well. Same thing goes with Maxi. I already discussed that when Maxi was basically just accepted to be the best hand trap in the game, and some people even put Gamma in that category for the same reasons. Being able to stop Double Helix, being able to stop, without targeting by the way, being able to stop Heavy Metaphors Electrum. So for the most part, it felt like these hand traps were not only strong and kind of kept your opponent from completely popping off, which they would automatically win the duel, but it also felt like the same kind of cards helped against Spiral and against Pendulum Magicians, which is why they were a necessity. You look at something like Ghost Ogre, is it really all that good against ABC? Because I don't really know. I feel like they could easily still summon, Buster Dragon without it. You look at Gamma, is it really all that good against something like True Draco? Because if they don't go for the invoke side, I don't think it's actually that great against True Draco. You look at Winter Cherries, and I mean, I guess maybe it's a Buster target, but that's kind of it. I feel like you don't even need it there. You look at something like Droll and Lockbird, yeah, it's really fantastic against Trickstar or any deck that opens up with Terraforming maybe. But outside of that, I feel like it really doesn't have a ton of value. If your opponent just says, I'm going to normal summon Alistair, activate the effect, if you draw on a Lockbird, then they're probably just going to smile and be like, thanks for the neg 1. I think I'll just go ahead and summon my Raijin, get my Alistair back for next turn. Now, the one exception is I do believe that Ash Blossom has probably cemented itself into kind of like mainstay meta decks. And the reason is, I think Ash Blossom has just like, it is surpassed what it is to be a hand trap. The reason Ash Blossom is so good is because it doesn't just stop like monster effects and what your opponent wants to do. It kind of stops just the necessities of Yu-Gi-Oh! When you look at all the other cards that I named, I don't really feel like any of them are main deck worthy. Maybe Gamma if you're playing like Cyframes, but at that point, you're literally playing Hand Trap the deck, you know what I mean? But I honestly don't feel that hand traps are going to be a mainstay part, especially when you combine that I feel like the decks right now that we're going to be playing are significantly weaker, and the fact that traps are kind of backed. And I don't want to look too much into the future, but another very prominent card might be Infinite Transience. This is another card that I actually super underrated. I wasn't sure if it was really that good. I thought, oh man, it's just Effect Veiler. But if you're playing a back row heavy deck, and I think back row heavy decks are about to return because of Solemn, because of Torrential, because of Bottomless Trap Hole, this is going to be another card you're probably going to want to run. And unlike some of the things like Ogre, this card works really good going first and going second, and sometimes it can even summon monsters like Altergeist Multi-Faker, which is just like a little neat interaction, or you can use it on board to summon like paleo monsters from the graveyard. So some of these back row decks would rather run Infinite Transients than actually run a card like, Ogre or Veiler or another Hand Trap or Gamma, cards that might be only good in one specific matchup, whereas an Effect Veiler or a negation type card like Transients might be good across all matchups. So you guys let me know, do you feel like Hand Trap play is going to go down? And I don't, again, mean that it's going to be eliminated. I just don't, all right, I mean that you're probably just not going to see numbers of 10 plus anymore. I think we're going to not even see 7. I think hand traps are about to move to maybe 5 to 4, somewhere around, or 3 to like 5 range. I don't think it's going to be anything higher than that. But if you guys disagree, that's perfectly fine. Leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already and turn on that notification. And oh, by the way, Infinite Transients comes out in Flames of Destruction. That will be in May. So it'll be right after we get our next ban list, or right about the time they're about to drop a new ban list, just in case anybody wanted to know.